Thank you.
My very favorite person and friend until his last days was Jackie Robinson. And it is because of this very special friendship that Skyhorse Publishing has been considerate and made me proud by asking me to write a children's book. Marianne, myself, all the kids who grew up at the hotel, we were inured to celebrities. You've seen one, you've seen them all. We're kids. Jackie Robinson is coming to Grossinger's. Wow. We stood in line to the PR guy for the hotel, not Mr. Blackstone. Please, we want to meet Jackie. So we stood in line and we were introduced. And they bring him, Jackie, up. Here's so-and-so, so now they come to me. Marianne was a championship ice skater, someone else was a skier, and then there was me. But I could play ping pong. So he said, and Mr. Robinson, this is Tania Grossinger, she's our champion ping pong player. And he stops in front of me, he says, oh, I'm very nice to meet you. How do you do? And he said, how about let's have a game of ping pong this afternoon. How about 4 o'clock? Would that work for you? And I'm saying, yeah. So I said, sure, that would be lovely. And of course, at 4 o'clock, I wasn't there. I was in my room. The phone rings. And this gentleman's voice, Miss Grossinger. Yes. No, never called me Miss Grossinger in my life, so I'm already nervous. This is Jackie Robinson. Why aren't you here? 4:01, I'm in the ping pong room. We played, I don't know whether he beat me or I beat him, but I can tell you that afterwards, we sat, he bought me an ice cream soda. And he had asked some questions about me, which I wasn't aware of. And at a moment he said to me, why weren't you here? And I said, oh, look, at this hotel, everybody says, they never do what they say they're going to do. I mean, I know how it works. And he said, aren't you a bit too young to be so cynical? And I said, and I cannot in my heart believe I ever said this in my life. I said, Jackie, I'm really being, like feeling awful. I said, I don't know if you understand what it's like to be on the outside looking in.
Well, we all make mistakes now and then.
As you can tell, I was not very close to my family. Our friendship lasted through many years. When I went to Brandeis, he had a party for me. I went to see him and Rachel, I knew his children. In 1953, there was a fire at Grossinger's. And in that fire, it was in a staff cottage, and there were a number of people, staff workers who I know, who died. Jackie was in Brook and Dodger training camp in Florida, and he heard of it. 2 days after the fire at Brandeis, I received a handwritten letter, and if you will permit me, I would just like to read this.
Is this the page?
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Sorry.
Hold on.
Okay. And then a few days later came a letter bearing a Pensacola, Florida postmark. It read, Dear Tania, I was so shocked about the tragedy, and I can only imagine how terrible you must feel being so far away from home. I immediately interrupted spring training to write to you and tell you how much you are in my thoughts. At least we can thank God there were others who were lucky. Tania, I hope nothing ever changes your ideas about God and His doing. I know how horrible it was, and sometimes when disaster strikes near, we want to question. But Tania dear, we must always understand. Please, for my sake, try. Love, Jackie Robinson. I still, to this moment, can't say it without choking up.
Now, I'm going to ask you like a historical question. Obviously, Jackie Robinson is one of the single most important African Americans in the history of evolution of civil rights and in sports. There had to be a reason why Branch Rickey, of all the great talented black players who are playing in the Negro leagues, why he picked Jackie Robinson beyond his talent for the temperamental reasons. If Jackie Robinson you knew, what qualities did he possess that really enabled him to do what Branch Rickey asked him to do, which was essentially not fight back? That he had to be able to take it and never ever fight back. And in the first 4 or 5 years?
Bill, that's a marvelous question, and which I haven't been asked before, but I think if I could bring it in one sentence, he had a heart. And I think it was that heart that made it possible for him to get past the ugliness and the anger and the stupidity of so many people who acted out their, anger, stupidity at him. He was focused, he knew what he wanted, and he was going to get it, and he was always going to be a man he could look at in the mirror and smile at.
Well put. We're still going to deal with celebrities, and we'll move on to a couple other areas. And by the way, if you have questions, we're going to leave plenty of time. Excuse me. Plenty of time for questions. Just shout that out. Red buttons. We'll take one more of the people who worked there and whom you knew.
I'll tell you. Can I substitute Buddy Hackett instead?
Buddy Hackett.
No, for a very good reason. At one point, before this person was a celebrity, there was a young man named Butch Hacker. Butch Hacker was a roly-poly. And who is the fat guy with Abbott and Costello?
Lou Costello.
Lou Costello, all right. Butch Hacker decided that he needed a job in the Catskills. There was a gentleman named Mort Curtis who had an office at the Grossinger office on West 57th Street. He went to Mort Curtis and he said, I'd like a job at Grossinger's. And he said, what can you do? So Butch Hacker waddles around and starts imitating Lou Abbott. Lou Costello, forgive me, Mr. Costello. And it dawns on Mort Curtis, we have a job for you. He gives him a one-way ticket on the short line bus up to Liberty, New York. And he has a job. His job is to push the guests in the winter down the toboggan slide. And he did that for 3 months. After that, 3 months later, after he thawed out, he changed his name to Buddy Hackett. And he became a performer. Now, he performed at Grossinger's a lot. One of the ways that he got me started in a way of making money when I was like in my young teens. During the summer, guests came to Grossinger's, usually they're reserved from July 4th to Labor Day. And it was hard to book shows because we had 3 variety shows a week, and now you're talking about 10 weeks a year, and they don't want to do the same person twice because the guests say, I already saw him. They get annoyed. So, but certain people did come twice. So during the week, the comics were sort of like the lower scale. One day there's Buddy's doing a show. Do you remember his routine? Chinese restaurant, one from column A, one from column B, or something like that. He does his routine, nobody laughs. They're sitting on their hands, and no one, it was a disgrace. Show was over, closes, he walks out, and I knew him, from the toboggan days, and I said, Buddy, I know what happened. And he said, what happened? And I mentioned the name of a comic who appeared the week before and had stolen his routine. I said, he did your routine. So they knew the punchline, so they're not going to clap. They already clapped. At which point, Buddy said, I'll make you a deal. I always knew who was being booked in advance. He said, when you know I'm coming, I want you to see the shows that week. And if anybody is doing my routine, I want you to tell me. 1, so I can kill him when I get back. 2, that I don't report him, and I'll pay you $1. And then he told Red Buttons and everybody else that there's this kid up there who will watch and let them know if someone's stealing their routine. So I picked up some very nice pocket money.
All right, let's move on to. We have full 15 minutes left, so we want to make sure we leave plenty of time for Q&A. Food. It was always like food. Let's talk about what the food was like, how it was served. It was massive amounts, massive portions.
First it was lots. Lots of food. But it was very interesting. You would come, let's say someone comes into the menu and they see on the menu gefilte fish. And they say to the waiter, what is gefilte fish? Not that would happen at Grossinger's because everyone knew who gefilte fish was. And there were 2 answers. One was, it's a combination of whitefish and pike. The other was, wait a minute. And they would run into the kitchen and come out and say, this is gefilte fish. there was, people would order like 14 dishes. Oh, the dessert menu looks so good, I don't know which one I want, have them all. In the book, Growing Up at Grossinger's, I devote a few pages that tells exactly how many eggs were cracked. We had a woman who worked in the kitchen. Before carpal tunnel was a real disease, she sat, remember Mary Ann Rosie? She used to sit in front of 2 barrels with eggs. Here goes the eggs, here goes the shell, here goes, every day for years and years and years. One day I expected her wrist to fall off into one of the barrels. How many pastries were prepared daily? How many pounds of meat? At one point, I didn't cook. I grew up ordering from a menu. I was about to be married briefly, and I went into the kitchen because I didn't know how to cook, and I said to the chef, "Chef, how do you make a steak?" And he said, "You take 1,000 pounds of..." Not going to work. But food was important, well, for 3 reasons. That's what people came for. 2, people would dress up for dinner. Very dressed up. I'm talking mink coats and diamonds on July 4th. But this was, dinners, especially weekend dinners, was show-off dinners. And they didn't serve wine during those days. I don't remember wine as ever being a part of a meal. But the food was wonderful. I know it was written up in gourmet magazines. I don't remember anybody ever complaining about not liking the food. It was served nicely. It wasn't thrown at the table. It was an event. You have athletic events, you have entertainment events, and now you have stuff your face events.
In a way, ahead of its time. I mean, if anybody read that article in the New York Times yesterday about Craig Claiborne and the evolution of American food,
exactly.
What you were doing up there was some avant-garde in a way.
Well, certainly there was something for everybody. If someone was vegetarian, if somebody only wanted fruit, if someone only wanted dairy. I mean, there is nothing. I mean, it almost used to be a game. Can you fool the chef? Can you trick him? Can you order something that he can't make? And I don't think it ever happened.
Well, that's interesting. All right, so we talked about celebrities, we talked about food, sex. There must be some stories about guests.
I've got you under my skin. I have got you